Hello my Rocky Road mini bites. Welcome to this video. This is part 2 of the same video in part 1. It's just I split it into 2 because originally it would have been 40 minutes long and I know nobody's watching that these days. And if you haven't watched part 1, the reason why you should trust me to give you all of this advice is because in my 2025 geography edexcel A-level exam I got 219 out of 350 and the grade boundary was 270 for an A star, so I got 29 marks above that. In paper 1 physical I got 76%, in paper 2 human I got 86%, in paper 3, which I think only edexcel and OCR do, I got 91%, and my NEA I got 93%. So I love the A level and I hope you do as well, and I hope you get really well with the advice that I've given. 3 and 4 markers, if it is one reason only, it pretty much is always one reason only, so just expand on that point. Do not say anything that is unrelated. And it's kind of hard, and I don't know if I've ever gotten 4 out of 4. I think I've always just got 3 out of 4. However, you do want to expand it 3 times, so you have your point, and try and not make your point at the start too specific because then you can't expand. So give a decently general point that still answers the question, and then expand it, and expand it. Or bring an example in, because I think you would get a mark for that, of a group of people who are affected or a place in the world where this happens. So for example, if it's the impacts of climate change on coastal erosion, you could say increased temperatures means increased storm frequency because the 26.5 degree threshold in ocean surface temperature is being met, therefore there's increased storm frequency and more frequency of destructive waves, and therefore this erodes softer geology coast faster, and then that would decrease the value of people's homes and increase the risk of deaths for people living on the coast if it's the effects of climate change on people. So that would be 4 points. So this is my golden nugget of the video. That is, I think, the reason why I bumped up to an A star so much from an A. So always think about the impacts. Before you go into the exam, you need to have memorized all of these impacts I'm about to tell you now, because it makes it really easy when you're answering questions. You just have this mental checklist and it's oh, it's got these impacts, I'll write about these. So think about long and short-term impacts. Obviously you've got your economic, social, environmental and political impacts or factors. Also, everything is always socioeconomic. The depressing part of geography was just everything is economic. Everything can be linked back to businesses wanting to make more money or governments trying to make more money and trying to save costs. Which demographic of people are the most affected? And then finally, this is S tier geography A-level tips, but what uncertainty can there be relating to this question? So for example, aging populations, climate change, for literally everything environmental, climate change is the big one, changing energy sources, or honestly just who's in government, Donald Trump now. You always can just say, however, there is uncertainty because of who's in government, or population growth. So memorize those and you will be able to stick it in, link it to the question, and that will definitely boost your answer. Also, don't underestimate the math section, because that's kind of easy marks once you understand how to do the math. So don't ignore how to do percentage change, logarithmic graphs, scales, and histograms and stuff. So make sure you do revise those and that you actually know how to do them confidently, because you don't want to lose those easy marks as well. And if you can do it fast, that gives you 5 extra minutes on another answer. And bro, geography paper timings were so bad. Oh my god, I remember adrenaline afterwards, the few minutes when the invigilators are collecting your papers and you're just there thinking, oh my god, you genuinely speed run through 2.5 hours. Was it 2 hours 50? Something like that. Was it 1 hour 50? I'm actually not sure, but I remember the timing was genuinely shambolic and horrendous and awful. So the way that I revised geography was I spammed Anki flashcards, and I would really recommend doing that for all your statistics and also content. And the way that I did it was I would rephrase the spec. So this is where the spec is really important. I would rephrase the spec word for word, copy and paste it, but then change it into a question. So the way that the edexcel specification is laid out is you have your main topic. So each big topic is split into 9 subtopics, and then each subtopic is then split into like 3 sections. So for each section, I would make a flashcard, and I would just make a question based on that with the specific wording. That's really important. And then adding in extra information from my class notes. And honestly, like, this is the best way to get it into your long-term memory. Like, when me and my friend went on the train the other day, and she said something about Kenyan flower market collapsing, something like that, and I was like, oh, that's like Fiala Yoko in 2010, because that's what she was referencing. And we were both like, yo, because we didn't even go to the same school, but we learned the same case study. And obviously awful for the Kenyan farmers, but I can still remember so many random statistics from geography because of those Anki flashcards. Because again, for me, I thought the geography exams were hard because I didn't know how to answer the questions. But when you make flashcards like this, you know exactly what part of the specification they're referring to when they ask a question, because you've made those questions based on the specification. They can't ask anything apart from that, right? As well. So then I would know the specific subtopic that they were referring to, and then I could pull the correct case studies, and then I could pull the correct content from it. Because I think especially human geography, you get questions that are really similar, but then the answers are referring to completely different parts of the spec. So you want to make sure that you're doing that so that you're picking up the marks. And I really enjoy just like reading the news and things like that to enjoy geography more and see how it's really, like, it's genuinely applicable to the real world. If I was president, if I was prime minister, geography A level would be compulsory for everybody. But that's why you don't need to read the news and stuff to get statistics and figures. Like, I never did that. I just used the ones that they gave in class or the case studies in the textbook, but it just helped me understand the world a bit more. So yeah, like, don't underestimate regular knowledge. So there was a question I had about climate change in governments, or like climate change interventions or something, and I literally just put a very simple, like, Donald Trump's government pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement. I couldn't remember the year or anything. I just put that in, and that also counts for something, you know. And I had just read that on the news briefly. So if you're trying to cram or memorize in the week before, the strategy that I used for my actual A level, because I revised 2 weeks before properly, I think, like, I had been revising throughout the 2 years and like doing my topic tests and stuff, but I did like properly revise 2 weeks before. Anyway, what I did was I would do my flashcards and I would write out my answer in one colour pen, and then I would look at the answer, and if I got anything wrong or missed out anything, then I would write out the answer again in a different colour. And I would recommend using more colourful colours rather than just like black. However, do not mix up your colours. Do not start doing all sorts of different colours. And you can use this for all your subjects, not just geography. But this was like the strategy that I used that really helped. After I went through my geography flashcards and I did all that, then I would do it on, like, I had this massive whiteboard. Oh my god, it was like the one at Tesco that's like massive. But I would go through the subsections for geography. So I would have the specification with me, and then I would cover up the content bit, but I would look at the subsections, so like the 9 to 12 parts that each of the 6 topics was separated into. And then I would try to remember all of the content that was covered in each subsection, and I would blurt that out, which is where you just write everything from memory, and I would do that in one colour, and then I would look at the specification and then go back and do it, the corrections, in another colour. And if you kept doing this, you would generally like properly memorise the whole content. Because I started quite late, I didn't. But it was good enough for my short-term memory, of course, because I got pretty good in my A level. This is another golden nugget in this video that I really wish I did sooner. But again, because if you were like me and your issue is reading the question and then trying to link it to the relevant content that the mark scheme wants you to think of, the best thing that I did also was I made mind maps for every single topic. So I had 6 mind maps, and then it would branch out into each of the subsections, and then from the subsection it would branch out into a very short brief summary of like the 3 points in each subsection, and I would also add in case studies, underline it so it like stood out on the mind map. And this for me, because I did this about 3 days before my A level, but I would look over those a lot, and like on the way to my exam as well, I was looking over there. And what this helped me do was see how the different subsections arrange itself and link to each other within the broader topic. And then I also knew what case studies were related to what subsections, and then I also could just memorize and like visualize, because it's easier to visualize the mind map than it is just like words on a document. So mind map is great for this because you're not putting too much information on there, you're putting the smallest amount of information for you to be able to recall what is sort of in that subtopic, you know. So I would really recommend that. Give each mind map a different colour as well so that it stands out. I really wish I did this in year 12, or like even like if you're in year 13 now, do it now, and then just look at it every day, every other day, and you will have such a clear understanding and structure of the topics in geography that you will be able to answer the questions so easily. Also, do every single past paper. Past papers are arguably like the most important resource for revising geography. I would say do them under time conditions, although this is pretty difficult. However, if you are able to do that, maybe take away like 20 minutes and then try to do it in that time, because this then helps if you get some really difficult questions in your actual exam, and then you can still do the paper, you know, because you've trained yourself to be able to answer quickly. So that's like if you're cracked at geography, you should do that. Or if you're just like, so it helps accommodate for if you're ill or tired during the exam. I remember in my paper 3, I had 4 hours of sleep. And you know when the invigilators are reading out the rules and stuff, but you've heard it for every single exam, and paper 3 was my last exam, I think, or second to last. Paper 3, I genuinely started falling asleep when the invigilators were talking. I was like, please hurry up, because I'm about to fall asleep. My head was pounding throughout it. But if I did that strategy, I mean, it was fine, but like that strategy really helps for just in case something happens for your actual exam. You know that you are capable of still doing it. But if you're kind of bad at geography, don't just use up all the past papers. Like, I would recommend getting good at geography, and then when you're on the grade below boundary, then start doing them timed. And also, you don't need to be doing proper written answers in the time, right? Like, draft out answers, bullet point it, because that is the main thing rather than like actually writing it out. However, it is also important to do a few past papers properly in time conditions to get used to the exam, because the exams are hard. And I really enjoy doing this with my friends as well. And you can ask teachers to check over your answers too, but get good at your answers before you focus on speed. And then if you don't have time to draft answers, look at the mark schemes. Like, the mark schemes are so important for seeing what you need to write about. And I think if you look at enough questions and enough mark schemes, you will start to see patterns in what they're asking and what they're expecting too. Also quite important, go through the textbook that hopefully you get given by the school, because sometimes teachers might miss out content. Sometimes they might miss out chapters that are actually quite important and could genuinely come up on your exam. So make sure that you are going through that and doing a bit of like self-study outside, just to make sure that you have covered everything on the spec. And again, go through the spec, tick off everything that, you know, you've got flashcards for, or that you've learned or that you've covered, because you don't want to miss anything out. Ask teachers to mark any past papers if you can. Also, this is kind of random, but if you can't think of anything else to write and you've written like 1 paragraph, 2 paragraphs, and you're like, ooh, just write anything that is related to that. If you think back to the subtopic, just write anything related to it, because even if it doesn't feel like it's answering the question directly, if you write something that's like semi-related or within the same subtopic, there's a very high chance it is on the mark scheme. It's just maybe you've lost that linking point that actually brings it in direct like links. So don't just write nothing, okay? Write something. And about statistics, I personally memorized loads of statistics, and the way that my brain was, like, I needed to memorize the right numbers. Like, I can't just estimate something. However, your examiners don't know the specific statistics a lot of the times. Also, you don't need to memorize a lot, just memorize really relevant ones. Like, I learned too many, but it was fine. Like, I enjoyed it. So you don't need to, and also don't spend most of your time doing statistics. Like, that's not the most important part about geography at all. And then just to round off this video, like, paper 3 is really important for edexcel. However, you can't revise for it really. I think just trying to remember the general concepts, because obviously you don't need any case studies, so you just forget about all of that and then just do all of the past papers for it and look at the mark schemes, because the questions are so silly. I don't know how it really relates all the time, the mark scheme, but just do the past papers, remember the main concepts and the uncertainties and the impacts, you know, the things I said earlier in geography, and hopefully you should be okay. I don't know if you can tell, my throat is practically gone now. My lips are so chapped, and I just had a cup of tea before this video as well, but I'm probably going to go to lunch now if I don't make the video about the NE8, because it was like over a year and a half ago now for me. Just print out the mark scheme, look at where the marks are coming from, and follow that religiously. Make sure that you have done everything. Like, tick it off when you've done it, print it out as well, so you know that you've not missed anything important out. And yeah, use statistics, make sure that your graphs look good. Also, you could look for patterns in previous exams, right? So I remember looking through the edexcel questions for every single human paper, and every 2 years they always have a question related to tax havens, and I was like, ooh. So I revised tax havens and it came up in the 2025 exam, which is the one that I sat. So you could try and look for patterns, but don't spend too much time because it's very unpredictable. But I will, because I made a document for some reason 3 days before my A-level. Like, I should have been revising something else, but it's all right. I made a document with all of the questions from edexcel papers since like 2017, so I can add that to like my public Google Drive and let you guys have access to that as well. Also, relating to that, revise the things that are most likely to come up, right? So particularly, for example, tectonics, revise governance, revise the human like management, preparation, response aspects more than the physical sections. Like, they're not really going to be asking you how are plumes formed, because there's not that many. They give you 2 proper questions, so they're more likely to ask you about something that's related to how they've responded to a tectonic incident. And finally, please don't worry too much about your mark, because every single exam that I've taken, I don't think I've thought I would get an A-star, and I did. Like, geography is one of those subjects where you don't really know how you've done, so you just need to hope for the best, okay? And try not to lose too much sleep about it. I hope that you get the A-star in geography, and you have a great rest of your day and week. And please do like this video, comment if you find it helpful, and subscribe. And I also am offering geography A-level tutoring as well. Mainly edexcel, because that's what I'm used to, but I could do other ones as well. And yeah, love you lots. Mwah.